place of extremities, extreme weather, extreme beauty, extreme challenge. Every animal here can kill you, it seems. But it's a great place in education to grow up.
You're listening to Around the School Table, hosted by me, Steve Davis, and proudly powered by Zuno Suite. We'll be bringing together the many voices shaping primary and secondary education across Australia, from principals and teachers to education thought leaders and system innovators. Whether you're in the classroom, the staff room, or the boardroom, this is your podcast to be informed, inspired, and connected. Today on Around the School Table, we're joined by Jason Mustin, Assistant Principal at Good Shepherd Lutheran College in Palmerston in the Northern Territory, a school you could define by its distance as well as its deep sense of community. With a foundation in medical science and 17 years shaping young minds, Jason brings both analytical precision and a genuine passion for people to his leadership and his teaching. Now, whether it's translating national education strategies for the unique context of the Territory, building continuity amid staff turnover, or helping students forge identity in a hyper-connected world, Jason's insights cut through to what matters most in education today. For educators who are ready to embrace challenge, adapt with purpose, and find optimism in difference, I hope this conversation will bring some fresh ideas and some real-world inspiration. Jason, welcome to Around the School Table.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Now, 17 years as an educator. You started your professional journey in medical science. If you're a people person, the laboratory probably isn't for you, is something that you're on paper is saying. Can you share what that translation looked like for you and how your scientific training continues to shape how you lead and teach today?
Yeah, right. Well, so I worked in the lab and I passionately had the night shift. So, I got to know my work colleagues quite well because we just spent the wee hours of the morning testing blood samples. But very quickly, when you're a people person and you need to talk to people and you run out of people to talk to and topics to talk about, you get a little bit antsy. My wife, who was, I guess, fiance at the time, was an educator, and I thought, oh, well, I'll just do a diploma of education and we can one day adventure around the world and teach. That was my, I guess, dream then. Yeah, and then jumping into the classroom, it was, very quickly I learned. I just love young people. I love, those angsty teenagers that are just trying to navigate life in a very grey world.
You've taught chemistry and biology, and with your background as a former medical lab scientist, you would have brought a deep level of subject knowledge into the classroom, perhaps more than many teachers normally would. You mentioned you got sucked into the world of middle school.
Yes.
And you've just tapped into that angsty stage. What is it about this age group that continues to challenge you and energize you?
Oh goodness, it depends on the day that you ask me this question. It's probably what I enjoy about leadership and staff. I think, especially, I guess, in the last 20 years, teenagers, people are trying to find clarity. That whether you're an uncertain teenager and you have hormones, you have parents, you're trying to separate your worlds. Who am I? And that's that clarity of a teenager. And I think even teachers now, as roles are becoming more complicated, more demands of teachers, and you have parents who are like, hey, we didn't grow up with education like this and funds. I think role clarity for teachers has become a bit of a challenge. And, we have a greater vocabulary for well-being, and work-life balance seems to be a very big theme amongst young educators. And how do we get role clarity around that and what's required of a teacher? So, I guess I like looking at the gray and just trying to carve out clarity for people, for students, because it is a challenge.
I've got two daughters who are 15 and 17 at the time of recording, and being with them and their friends, one thing I've noticed is they're very fast with their judgments and their conversation. It's like they have a tough shell around them, but you get them in the right moment. There's someone who is desperately trying to work out what's next, and there's a really open heart. Is that marrying with what you experience in the schoolyard?
Yes, yeah. I say that surprisingly because it probably happens every day, but I think you have to look for those moments that are getting less and less where the kids let their guard down. I think their world is watching short video clips about people and being ready to hit a thumbs up or a like or a dislike or a let me type my reaction to this and they do that on a screen where they don't get the initial feedback of a face from someone. So to get them out of that mode, yeah, I think as teachers we're working out new strategies to get them out of their comfort zones, to be able to go, hey, there's more to you than just, or why do you think that? Even that the question of why is a very powerful one right now, and giving them time to think about their why, I think is another one.
You just triggered a little footnote for me. I started my career in radio, and Vaughan Harvey, with Men Who Taught Me, said in an interview, always be prepared to be quiet and give space so the other person can speak. And what triggered that was you saying being so quick with these short videos to fire from the hip with a like or a dislike or a comment. I wonder how that advice would stand up today, because silence seems to be very, very hard to find.
Yeah, I was just even just chatting to some of the school captains as they give speeches, and that obviously they battle nerves and they're just trying to get through this. No one's ever complained about someone giving a speech too slowly, is what I always tell them. So just there's never a long enough pause.
Yes. Now, look, you've noted that, and I quote, Antarctica is closer to Melbourne than our school. With such physical and, I guess you'd say, cultural distance, how do you and your team adapt national education strategies to make sense in the unique context of the Northern Territory?
That's a huge question. I guess connection is an interesting word. We're in a world that's, I guess, so connected by internet, and you and I can have this conversation, and I think even in my calendar, I think I have about 4 other Zooms with 3 other states. So there's that kind of loose connection, but then there's this interconnection of Darwin, with just the different people groups, different types of people coming and going in Darwin. It's a very transient place, and I guess it's a skill to learn how to be connected, let alone teaching kids to be connected to their teacher, because even in the student perspective, it's like, well, that teacher, how long are they going to be with us type of thing.
Wow.
And yeah, we do have to put effort and finances into connecting with the greater education landscape around Australia, for sure. So that's sending people on trips to, generally now we kind of bring people up, and we'll even call other schools and go, hey, we're going to bring this person up if you want to join us. It depends on whatever they're offering. But yeah, you definitely have to put a lot of effort into staying connected.
Do you think there are some things in the national education strategies that just don't work in the top end? I'm asking this because I spent a lot of time in Darwin and Northern Territory in my day job, and you feel like it's a different part of the world. And I had to acknowledge, almost like a badge, that I'm a Southerner who's visiting.
Yeah.
And there is an us and them. Who needs it more? Do we, from the Northern Territory perspective, need to be learning from and finding ways to integrate with that national curriculum, that national strategy? Or is it important the other way around?
I think it's important both ways. I think you could go one route and say, yes, because, we need the funding. because funding is obviously a big thing. Yeah, but there is a kind of a territory approach, and you can see it and feel it. And I often always have to refer to myself as the ignorant Southerner, and it takes me more. I think you do have to be willing to be a learner the whole time. Yeah, I'm trying to remember what the question was.
Well, it's about the importance of for the territory to tap into national education strategies, whereas there are things that I think some of the rest of Australia could learn from the sensitivities and the way of life that is there in the Northern Territory as well. It brings a different way of looking at things. Sort of, I remember my first time there, the manager I was working with looked at me because he'd said, "Oh, what do we wear? We only wear shorts in the Northern Territory." And I was there in my long pants, and he said, "Oh," and he smiled. I passed a test that I
Yeah,
didn't fall for his joke. That sort of
yeah,
Aussiness.
yeah. That actually popped into mind as you were talking. And I always tell this to people. The beautiful thing about the top end is there's no pretense. You could go out to dinner with a singlet, shorts, and thongs, and sit next to someone who has a nice shirt and slacks on, and there's no judgments either way. Now, if you wore a tie, you would definitely be judged, I would think.
Yes.
um, yeah, definitely what you wear. No one cares too much because it's just hot.
Yeah, of course. Now, many educators in the Territory stay for just a couple of years.
Mm.
How do you maintain your program continuity and your school culture when staffing is so transient? What sort of
Yeah,
support, what sort of
yeah,
incentives make a difference?
that's a good question. Clarity is important. I think just being very clear on who we are as a school. Um, just the whittling it down to just short, sharp. These are our values. I think for us as a school, our little anecdotes are connect before content. You have to connect, whether it be before a staff meeting. We want to make sure we're connecting as a group, whether it be and just in your normal class lessons, we connect before content. And the other one's radically welcoming. We want to welcome everyone. So if a student's late to class, as a teacher, you can, tell them off straight away, or you can just radically welcome into the classroom and then, address the lateness later. But just as a community, making sure that we're valuing and respecting each other. I think those are, so yeah, I guess clarity in that, in who you are is very important. And it's just good to know and to remember, yeah, some people do come up for 2 years because they want an adventure and you want to see these national parks and really it's a world, a place of extremities, extreme weather, extreme beauty, extreme challenge. Every animal here can kill you, it seems. But it's a great place in education to grow. I think a lot of schools down south might, you wait for the opportunity to apply for this position, or I want to try this, but this teacher's been there for years and that's just who they are. I think up here in the territory, you can kind of, if you're proactive and know where you want to grow and develop as an educator, you can really get some amazing experiences. Yeah. Well, and I think on that national question you asked earlier, one thing I found recently that doesn't work, well, we haven't seen it work yet, is, like the Northern Territory came out with, we want to have the highest paid teachers in Australia. So they just cranked up the salaries for all teachers. They didn't tell us independent schools, which was annoying. But anyway, we got there. But that we don't seem to see an impact of that. Yeah, so it just tells us that really isn't what is going to tap into an educator. And I'm glad, because that's not what teaching's about. Teaching is it's a calling, and it's a very challenging. You have to have a heart. You have to put your heart into it, otherwise you won't last long. And I think that is a big challenge.
Good morning.
Selamat pagi.
Kalimera.
Buongiorno.
Magandang
좋은
umaga.
아침이에요.
Want to make sure every parent feels connected and informed, no matter what language they speak? Communication just got easier. With Zuno's multi-language feature, you can now connect with parents in over 130 languages, automatically translated, instantly understood, whether it's reminders, updates, or celebrations. Families receive your message in their preferred language, with no extra steps from you, no confusion, just clear communication. Every time. Try it today to build stronger school-to-home partnerships, inclusive, effortless, and effective.
There are a couple of things you said in that answer I want to circle back on, but the first one is this radical welcoming, this disposition of radical welcoming, and a student's late, welcome them, and you can maybe talk about that later. Can that get abused? I'm sure there are some people listening going, oh, hang on a minute, does that just then train the students that they can always come late? How does it work out in the real life?
It works. You still address it with the child one-on-one. I think any high school teacher would know you don't address a teenager in front of their peers. That's a beginning a losing battle. But also, even in the workplace, a boss doesn't abuse you for being late straight away. Why are you late? No, that's well. And who knows what the story is? Did they just have an argument with their parents and are just really struggling? Trying to figure out what the why. And sometimes if you're focused on their late, you're going to miss the other aspects and probably miss good opportunities to connect with them. And more importantly, help them learn.
Oh, absolutely. I will just correct one thing. In radio, my first boss did get grumpy if you were late for your shift, but
I think that's an important profession to be on time.
The other thing you mentioned was about the ability to move up through the ranks if you're aiming for a leadership role. Is your advice to educators listening who do want to experience leadership and test themselves, is your advice to move to the top end?
Oh, selfishly, I'd say yes, but no, definitely. I'd say yes, and then with the caveat, just if you are going to do that, just make sure you have the right supports in place. Make sure you have a mentor and someone to help support you in that space. Because there's a lot of little schools and around the territory, and a lot of times you find you're the only one there, and you're in those positions, and if you experience that very quickly, and that's what leadership is. There is this lonely element because you're at the top, and you just want to make sure you have those people, and it's the same down south, but you want to have those people that are you going to be your champions, your cheerleaders, but your critical friends. I think that's important in all leadership. I think there was Lee Johnson would have been on this show earlier.
Yes.
I consider him my cheerleader. So if I need that positive perspective brought back into my mind, I'll always give him a call. So it's important to just have that connection with people. Yeah.
Look, previously you've spoken candidly about the complexity within Indigenous communities in the Northern Territory. How has being embedded in this environment shaped your understanding of cultural literacy and equity in education?
I very quickly learned there's a lot that I don't know. I think that is a very important disposition because it is weird that there's just so many different Indigenous nations and they have their own rules, and I very quickly had this realization that it is such a challenge in the local realm, but I don't envy the government trying to come up with these solutions because we're trying to solve a lot of nations and integrating them into one. And how do you? It's challenging. I've learned a lot of I've gained a lot of respect. And the importance of listening and just asking questions.
Can you think of a moment or an interaction, an exchange where you really did meet a stretch goal and learn a lot about yourself and about the interactions, the fabric?
Often. Even I think one thing I've I learned, I did a fishing trip out into Arnhem Land, and you very quickly, I mean, I remember that trip distinctly, just thinking, coming away with a greater understanding of what connection to land means. You just kind of, you always hear it, and you talk about it and you acknowledge it quite well. But when you feel it, it was very interesting. Yeah, it was an amazing kind of, just the landscapes in the top end are just, yeah, leave you speechless a lot of times. And in that instance, we were walking through this um, area just as the wet season was finishing. I was walking barefoot with mud between the toes, and you see crocodiles and you see buffalo, and it's just, yeah, it's a pretty magical kind of thought. So I walked away with just that feeling of what connection to land means, and when it gets referenced, that yeah, it's deep and it's important, and it gave me a little bit a glimpse, I guess, of understanding. I don't think I will ever reach a point where I'm fully understand. So I guess that's I've come to terms with that.
I do sense there's a parallel with that feeling it aspect with what you said earlier about teachers connection first. You've got to feel you not coming to chase the salary. It's something you almost need to do.
Yeah, you definitely do, and any educator would tell you there's always that one kid who just drove you nuts, but then there was that moment where you got him. All those years, months paid off, and sometimes you may never see it, and you just kind of trust that it happens. I think I don't know. I told someone the other day, I probably get one real genuine thank you a year from a student, and where it's just unsolicited, it just comes up, or a note, and it's just like, just that one is enough to power you as a teacher for years to come, I think. So yeah, people were made to connect with each other. We're built for community. um, whether you're Indigenous, Norwegian, any nationality, we're built to connect. And when we're not connecting with people, we struggle, and I think more and more it's important to know that as young people, connection isn't just this friend likes me on Facebook, or sorry, Facebook's probably too old, but it just have a deep connection with people. And I think we have to teach kids more and more how to do that.
Just going further on that, you've observed that kids' identity is linked to going online. There's an intense desire to be individual, and I guess that's where they test and learn about that. What are some strategies that you found effective in helping students develop a grounded sense of self in such a hyper-connected world?
Really, we're trying to get them to articulate, who are you? That can be very challenging, because you first ask that, you'll get a superficial answer. And then so I think I try and ask students, what do you want to be like? And then I have to stop, and I have to re-clarify. I'm not asking you, what do you want to be? What do you want to be like? What do you want people to say about you when you grow up? Whether you want to be a carpenter or whether you want to be a doctor, that's fine. But what do you want to be like? How do you want people to describe you? Do you want to be funny? Do you want to be known as compassionate? And just get them to think that way. Like, it's interesting. But even the practical things, even in high school, you try and help some kids with conflict, or it's always, they always seem to like to ask you about relationship advice, and I got to break up with this person. Did you talk to them? Yeah, I told them this, and this. Did you tell them, or did you text them? Oh, I texted them. I'm like, well, that's not telling them. Being able to communicate face to face, and see how that feels, because it'll put you out of your comfort zone. I guess challenging them that it's okay to be out of your comfort zone, and it can be fun, because that's where you're going to grow and learn.
I really appreciate that nuance you bring to the question. Not what do you want to be, but what do you want to be like, because that really talks to the groundedness. But is there also a pragmatism about that, given that what looks like a career now is possibly not going to be one in 2 years' time? So,
Well, that's right. I mean, you look at teachers now, and I could easily say half of our staff have had another profession prior to teaching, and that's clearly becoming a big trend amongst all professions. Is people are just having multiple fields that they've worked in, which is great. It brings an awesome diversity to the classroom. It brings more experience that teachers can give to the students.
if Jason Mustin asked you, what would you like to be like? How would you answer?
Oh gosh, funny, caring. We just did this activity with some students, kind, and genuine. That's probably it. Strive to be kind, and not settle. I don't like to settle for mediocrity, but and humble. Like, just be a learner, someone who really listens. I think is probably what I would like to strive towards.
Well, to be a learner, yeah, that listening has got to be a key factor, doesn't it? Now, you've mentioned also that your own Year 8 child uses Copilot and navigates tech pretty fluently. Parents are often looking to schools for answers around social media use. What's the message you think schools need to deliver back to families?
That's a good question, and I've had a lot of parents in the last year, especially, and maybe I'm just leveraging the legislation that's kind of around putting the age limit of 16 on all of these things. I find parents are frustrated, and there's been a few. One of the first things in those conversations that I do is well, why does your child have a phone, and why do they have TikTok? And ultimately it does come down to this awkward moment where I point out that you are the parent, and it's your responsibility, not ours. And I acknowledge it is tough. And being a parent of a teenager, I learned very quickly the feelings and pressure of needing to be on social media to connect. Like, I can't have friends unless I have this. Like, it's very challenging. So I get the pressure. There is a pressure there that I didn't know about until I had my own child, which, I mean, look, very clearly I've done okay anyway, but he knows Snapchat's just never an option.
Well, Jonathan Haidt makes it very clear that parents will never win that when they're alone. They need collective approaches, which is why, yes, we're the parents, but it really helps if the school's laying down the law as well.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, we just had a parent in the office, which is why I was late today, talking through what are our agreements around this child struggling with their phone. That's kind of been her coping mechanism, which it seems to be a lot for not just teenagers, but parents. And I think a tangent is parents are modeling coping by sitting there on their phones. So it's a very challenging kind of, it's an episode altogether. But it is important, school and parents present as a team. That's again another reason why, as a school, this is who we are. These are our values. And as parents, this is what we expect of you. And I think it's been more challenging as schools to articulate, parents, this is what we expect of you. Yeah. Don't just drop and go. We'll take it for these six to 7 hours of the day, but we also expect this of you in those out of school hours.
There's that clarity, that role clarity.
I mean, do we need to issue report cards for parents? No,
Yeah.
just
Just in close, a couple of last things to touch on. You said you love agile learning.
Yep.
But you've also noted that schools reverted to structure post-COVID. What have you seen actually work in maintaining flexibility and innovation, especially when you're faced with the staffing shortages and also pretty conservative parent expectations at times?
Yeah, that's very challenging. The initial answer is I don't know, and we're always striving to change in that spot. And I think even as a school right now, that's probably our next challenge is articulating how do we approach teaching and learning. And I think as schools, as school leaders, with how fast things are changing, we do need to be able to go, how is teaching and learning? I mean, how is it when you have AI? What does that even mean? AI isn't a shortcut to get things done. It's just a way of operating a system. And so what does that mean for education? It's really, it's an exciting, scary spot. And it's because we really have to try and get ahead of things, and try and articulate clearly, this is how we use AI, and it's awesome. This is how we're going to use it to prepare young people, with clarity, with a black and white structure as much as we can. But it's a very interesting world that we're entering in.
And just finally, you mentioned earlier that the Territory is a place with no pretense, and I can concur. That's what my experience has been. Does that spirit influence the way that your school and other schools up there operate around how leaders lead, how community connects with school? I guess what I'm wondering is, can you plant your school somewhere in the south and it works the same, or is there something that the local community does that gives a certain bias and spin to the way things work?
I think you can, but I think you have to be genuine, and I mean, really, it is that you do have to connect before content. I think, but it's like all teaching. You have to have a relationship with the student to really get some good teaching and learning happening, and to help them grow and learn. So, yes, there is probably that homegrown small country town feel, but at the end of the day, it is about relationships. You're asking kids to go outside your comfort zone, be okay to fail, and let's reflect together. And if you don't have a relationship and showing that, hey, I care about you and I want you to grow, it's going to be very hard for kids to get into that space.
Jason Mustin, thank you for joining me around the school table.
Oh, no worries. Thanks for having me.